Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a space most people never dare to explore, the quiet, unshakable power of being detached and non-reactive. Right now, all around you, people are scrambling, desperate to be seen, chasing attention, reacting to every little thing like their worth depends on it. But not you, not tonight. Imagine this. You walk into a room, you say nothing, but somehow every eye finds you. Not because you're loud, but because your energy speaks before you do. That's the power of detachment, the quiet confidence that makes people lean in and wonder who you are. And fair warning, once you understand how this really works, you probably won't survive your old habits of over-explaining, overreacting, or performing for approval. Because after tonight, those things, they'll feel exhausting and unnecessary. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me, where are you tuning in from? Drop your city and local time in the comments. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Have you ever caught yourself in that endless loop of trying to be seen, trying to be heard, trying to be chosen? It starts so subtly, almost innocently. You're in a room, maybe with friends, maybe with strangers, maybe with someone you secretly hope will finally notice you. And suddenly, you feel it, that tightening in your chest, the quick mental scan. Am I saying enough? Am I interesting enough? Am I enough? And so you lean forward in conversation. You laugh a little louder than feels natural. You share one more story. You offer one more opinion. You try to squeeze yourself into the spotlight, hoping it might finally shine your way. But here's the brutal, quiet irony that no one really tells you. The harder you try to be noticed, the more invisible you often become. The more effort you pour into chasing approval, the more that approval slips through your fingers. It's exhausting, isn't it? And yet, so many of us fall into that trap. I'm not here to judge you for it. I've been there. We all have. But tonight, let me offer you a different path, a quieter one that doesn't demand you do more, but rather that you let go more. One where your presence doesn't come from performance, but from peace. And surprisingly, that peace, that stillness, it makes you irresistibly attractive. Not loud, not flashy, but quietly magnetic in a way that people can't quite explain but deeply feel. It's called detachment. It's called non-reactivity. And at its core, it's ancient, as old as the Stoic philosophers themselves. Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, men who faced chaos, betrayal, war, disease, and yet remained calm, unmoved, grounded, and from that stillness, they commanded respect, influence, presence. But let me be clear from the start, being detached and non-reactive isn't about being cold, distant, or emotionally numb. It's not about pretending nothing touches you. It's not about becoming some robotic, apathetic figure drifting through life. No, true detachment is warm. It's deeply human. It's magnetic. Precisely because while the world spins, you don't. While emotions flare, you observe. While others grasp and scramble for approval, you stand still. And in that stillness, you draw the world toward you. That is the foundation of quiet magnetism. Non-reactivity is the ultimate magnetism. Think about the most compelling people you've ever met. Not necessarily the loudest, not the ones who dominated the room with noise, but the ones who entered quietly, and yet the entire energy shifted. People leaned in, conversations paused. There was presence, an unspoken sense of this person knows themselves. They don't need to prove it. And ironically, that's exactly what makes them so attractive. In a world addicted to reaction, where everyone is constantly pulled this way and that by every criticism, every headline, every digital ping, the person who remains still, who doesn't flinch, who chooses when and how to respond, if at all, that person becomes a rare signal in a sea of noise. See, not reacting doesn't mean not feeling. It means mastering your emotions to the point where you own your response, where you don't hand the keys of your inner state to anyone who pushes your buttons. That's a kind of strength no social media course, no charisma coach, no 5-step how to be confident video can teach you, because it's not learned outwardly, it's forged inwardly. It's the quiet, steady cultivation of self-command. The Stoics understood this deeply. They didn't seek to eliminate emotion, they sought to master it, to hold it gently, observe it clearly, and then choose with clarity how, when, and even if they would act. The person swayed by every emotion, still a slave to circumstance, but the one who pauses, who observes, who chooses. That's the person who walks through life not untouched, but unshaken. And in critical moments, that calmness, it's the difference between success and failure. Sometimes quite literally between life and death. Take Captain Chesley Sully Sullenberger. The man didn't become a global icon for motivational speeches. He became unforgettable because in the most harrowing moment of his life, when both engines failed midair, when panic rippled through the cabin, when the odds of survival plummeted, he did not react emotionally. He didn't let fear commandeer the cockpit. He remained calm, present, precise. And with decades of training, not just in technical skill, but in mental stillness, he landed that plane safely on the Hudson River. Not a miracle, a product of cultivated calmness, a real-world example of Stoic mastery applied at 3,000 feet. Ask yourself, are you training yours? Because while most of us will never land a plane in crisis, we face emotional turbulence daily. The argument with a partner, the snide remark at work, the passive-aggressive message, the news headline designed to enrage you. And more often than not, we react, we defend, we explain, we lash out. All of it, involuntary, automatic. And in those moments, we hand over our power. Our presence shatters. Our magnetism gone. But there's another way. The next time someone triggers you, pause, just 3 seconds. Don't speak, don't flinch, don't roll your eyes. Breathe. Notice the impulse clawing its way up, the urge to defend, to attack, to explain. And then choose, say something, or don't. But either way, let it be a choice, not a reaction. That is your 3-second superpower. Simple, quiet, unmistakably attractive. And here's the beautiful twist. The less you react, the more clearly you see. When you're no longer hijacked by your own emotions, you begin to read the room, you notice what drives others. That anger, often masking fear, the excessive talking, usually hiding a hunger for validation, the aggression, a flimsy armor for insecurity. And suddenly, you're not pulled into their storm. You observe it, understand it, and lead from calm clarity. True presence doesn't come from how you look. It comes from what stays steady inside while the world tries to shake you. It's not forged in spotlights or applause, but in the quiet moments where you refuse to lose yourself. And once you've tasted that kind of presence, you'll never trade it for cheap approval again, because behind that calm lies something rarer than charm, louder than words, stillness. And in a world addicted to reaction, stillness is magnetic. But to cultivate stillness, you must master silence. And in the next lesson, we'll explore how in a noisy world, silence is the loudest voice you'll ever have. In a world that never stops talking, silence becomes a superpower. Think about it for a moment. Between the buzzing of your phone, the constant stream of notifications, the news cycle spinning endlessly, the chatter at work, the social media feeds designed to keep your mind hooked. When was the last time you truly heard silence? It's become so rare that when someone embodies it intentionally, powerfully, it doesn't just go unnoticed, it commands attention. We've been taught to believe that if we're quiet, we'll be forgotten. That silence equals invisibility. That to be seen, we must be loud, assertive, everywhere, all at once. But what if the opposite was true? What if silence, intentional, grounded silence, is not weakness, but the loudest, most magnetic signal you can send? See, silence used to be our natural state before the endless scroll, before the dopamine hits of validation, before our worth was reduced to views, likes, and retweets. But now, silence is so rare that when you practice it, people lean in, they notice, they wonder. You go silent online for a few days. Suddenly people ask, are you okay? Not because you're broken, but because stillness has become suspicious and strength often misunderstood. But here's the thing. Silence isn't absence, it's presence turned inward. It's control exercised quietly. It's confidence that doesn't require performance. And in a world engineered for noise, the one who chooses silence isn't weak. They're untouchable. Calm minds command attention. There's a reason we remember the quiet ones, the ones who don't rush to fill every gap in conversation, the ones who don't scramble to defend every opinion, the ones who let their stillness do the talking. Marcus Aurelius, one of history's greatest Stoics, said it simply: the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury, to remain unmoved, to rise above the noise, to meet insult with silence. That's confidence, that's composure, that's magnetism. Look at Keanu Reeves, a man who, without a single motivational speech, without chasing the limelight, has become one of the most quietly admired figures of modern culture. He doesn't overexpose, he doesn't argue publicly, he doesn't rush to prove himself. He remains still. And in that stillness, the world pays attention. There's a reason people can't stop talking about him. Even though he says almost nothing, his presence forged in silence speaks volumes, and he's not alone. Think about that one colleague at work, the one who rarely interrupts, who listens more than they speak. But when they do speak, the entire room shifts. The energy sharpens. Their words land 3 times heavier than everyone else's, not because they're smarter, but because they've mastered restraint, they've mastered silence. See, we confuse reaction with response. Reaction is instant. It's emotional, it's predictable. Response is slow, measured, unexpected, and in that gap lies influence. Real power isn't about how quickly you can clap back. It's how deliberately you can choose when, or even if, you respond at all. Silence creates safety and mystery. There's a paradox to stillness in the chaos of modern life. The person who remains steady, who doesn't flinch, who doesn't scramble to be understood, becomes a quiet island of calm. And people are drawn to that, to the calm, to the safety, to the mystery. It's an ancient truth echoed even in spiritual texts. Even fools are thought wise if they keep silent. And if even a fool can seem wise by mastering silence, imagine what happens when someone with true depth chooses not to speak. You see, Silence isn't just a wise move, it's a declaration. It says, I don't need to convince you. I know who I am. I'm not here to fight for space. I already own mine. Your chaos doesn't deserve my energy. That is rare, and rare is magnetic. Silence is a strategy. Look at Barack Obama. Agree with his politics or not, that man understood silence. During his presidency, critics often labeled him passive, too quiet, but it wasn't weakness, it was strategy. He avoided pointless confrontations with the press. He limited formal briefings. He refused to be dragged into every noisy debate. Instead, he chose where and how to speak. He bypassed the shouting matches. And when he did speak, it cut through. It reached people who were tired of the noise. It frustrated opponents who had no target to latch on to. Because how do you fight someone who refuses to step into the arena? You can't. And that is the quietest form of power. The Stoics taught this long before politicians perfected it. They understood that most conflict, most chaos, most wasted energy comes not from what's happening outside us, but from our reflexive need to react. But when you pause, when you remain still, when you master silence, suddenly, you're no longer a puppet. No one pulls your strings. You observe. And from that clarity, you choose the illusion of constant visibility. We live in a culture that equates constant visibility with relevance. We're told if you're not posting, you'll be forgotten. If you're not replying instantly, they'll lose interest. If you're not seen, you don't exist. But let me remind you, the sun doesn't shout to prove it's powerful. The ocean doesn't apologize for pulling back its waves. And your worth does not depend on constant performance. In fact, it's often the ones who pull back, who hold back, who choose their moments with care, that become the most compelling. They're the pause in a noisy song, the space between words, the period at the end of a long sentence that makes you stop and think. Stillness builds respect. Look, silence isn't easy. It feels uncomfortable at first, in conversations, in conflict, in the face of insult. Our instinct screams, defend yourself, be seen, prove your worth. But when you resist that urge, when you sit with the discomfort, you discover something stronger. You realize not every battle deserves your presence. Not every opinion deserves a response. Not every invitation deserves your yes. And when people see that, when they sense you won't be dragged into every storm, their respect for you deepens, because boundaries create dignity, and dignity is quietly magnetic. Start small, build quiet power. Here's how you begin. The next time someone says something that stings, don't flinch, don't speak, just pause, breathe, hold your stillness, and watch. Watch how quickly their energy changes. Watch how your calm unnerves them and centers you. In meetings, resist the urge to speak first. Observe. Let others reveal their intentions, their insecurities, their pressure points. And when you finally speak, your words carry gravity. When you master silence, you don't just become more respected. You become less predictable, less controllable, more magnetic, and yes, more dangerous. But I'll tell you this, silence is only the beginning. Once you mastered your voice, once you stop chasing attention, the next step is learning to let go, to release the need for validation, for constant recognition, for applause. And that is where true unshakable power is born. In the next part, I'll show you why letting go doesn't make you cold. It makes you unstoppable. There's this lie we've been told since childhood that if we're not seen, we don't exist. If we're not heard, we're irrelevant. If we're not agreed with, we've somehow failed. So we grow up reacting, explaining ourselves, defending our image, chasing validation. Like we're standing in a dark room, waving our arms, desperate for someone to turn on the light and say, "There you are. Now you matter." But the Stoics, they saw through this illusion thousands of years ago. They didn't beg the world to turn on a light for them. They lit their own. And that light wasn't blinding or theatrical. It was quiet, steady, self-generated. It came from within. That is the root of real power. And that power begins with one simple yet profoundly difficult act: letting go. Letting go makes you powerful, not cold. Let's clear this up right now. Detachment is one of the most misunderstood words in modern culture. People hear detachment and imagine someone cold, distant, emotionally numb, someone walking through life with arms crossed and heart barricaded. But that is avoidance, not detachment. True detachment isn't about turning your back on the world. It's about refusing to let the world control your inner state. It's not isolation, it's independence. Imagine your mind as a house. Most of us, we leave the windows wide open. Every passing opinion, breeze of criticism, gust of approval, it all blows straight in, tossing our furniture around, rearranging our peace, making a mess of our clarity. But the detached person, they learn to close the windows, to protect their space, to choose what enters and what stays out. And here's the paradox. The less you need the world to validate you, the more the world is drawn to you. Because independence is irresistible. It's rare. It's magnetic. David Goggins understands this better than most. The man trained alone in the dark. No audience, no applause, no external validation. He ran hundreds of miles on torn knees and blistered feet, not for clout, not for approval, but because he decided his worth, his discipline, his growth would not be tethered to the opinions of others. And what happened? The world noticed anyway, not because he chased their attention, but because his detachment made him mysterious. His self-mastery made him magnetic. His discipline, done in silence, became his loudest declaration. Detachment isn't emptiness, it's fullness guarded. There's another myth that detachment leaves you empty, but the opposite is true. Detachment leaves you whole. When you no longer hand over your self-worth to the latest compliment, when you stop bartering your peace for approval, when you protect your energy like it's sacred, you stop scattering pieces of yourself to anyone with an opinion, and slowly, quietly, you become whole again. The Stoics understood this. They didn't detach to escape life. They detached to fully live it, without being controlled by it, without being enslaved to every fleeting emotion, every public opinion, every passing storm. Ask yourself, if every compliment vanished tomorrow, would you still believe you're enough if the applause stopped? If the validation dried up, would you still stand tall? That is the real test of strength. That is the measure of magnetism. And when you live this way, something profound shifts. You no longer show up to be accepted. You show up because you've accepted yourself. And that energy, people feel it. It's quiet, but undeniable. The greatest freedom isn't doing whatever you want. Modern culture sells us a shallow version of freedom. Do whatever you want, whenever you want. But real freedom isn't doing whatever you want. It's not being forced to do what you don't want. It's not being enslaved by every urge, every opinion, every emotional impulse. When you're detached, you're free. Free from chasing approval, free from fear of rejection, free from the exhausting performance of proving yourself. You become whole, unshakable, magnetic. It's like gravity, unseen but undeniable. The power of choosing silence over explanation. Here's a simple practice to reclaim your power. The next time you feel the urge to explain yourself, to justify your boundary, to over-explain your no, pause, breathe, ask yourself, if I choose silence here, what do I really lose? And most of the time, the answer is nothing. You lose nothing, but you preserve your power, your dignity, your presence. In a world addicted to oversharing, to constant justification, the person who doesn't scramble to be understood, who doesn't defend every decision, who simply chooses silence, becomes rare, and rare is irresistible. The illusion of constant reaction. We live in a hyper-reactive culture, one that conditions you to believe if you're not reacting, you're irrelevant. If you're not constantly visible, you'll be forgotten. But here's the deeper truth. Most people are so busy reacting, they lose themselves entirely. They become fragmented, scattered, exhausted. But you can choose a different rhythm. You can become the pause, the stillness, the quiet certainty in the midst of everyone else's storm. When you master this, when you detach from the need to perform, you don't just disappear, you become unmistakably clear. You stop being predictable and start being powerful, the power of not needing to be chosen. Let me say something hard, but liberating. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need to be picked to matter. You don't need to be validated to exist fully. The person who needs nothing from outside themselves, who can sit quietly in their own worth, is often the one the world can't help but be drawn to. It's not arrogance. It's not detachment rooted in superiority. It's wholeness. It's knowing, even if you don't choose me, I've already chosen myself. And ironically, that's often what makes people choose you. Because here's the unspoken truth about human psychology. We're wired to chase what feels rare, to be curious about what feels grounded, to be drawn toward those who don't scramble for our attention, but stand steady in their own. Detachment is where strength gathers. It may not be obvious at first, your quietness, your boundaries, your silence. They may go unnoticed in a world addicted to noise, but over time, people feel the difference. You become the pause in their storm, the calm in their chaos, the mystery in their certainty. And that is when your energy becomes magnetic. Not because you demanded attention, but because your presence earned it quietly. In the next part, we'll go even deeper. We'll explore how your silence, your restraint, your non-reactivity isn't just a tool for peace, but your most disarming, unpredictable, and quietly dangerous form of power. There's a quiet kind of power that most people overlook. It doesn't shout, it doesn't posture, it doesn't rush into conflict, but when it shows up, it changes the entire energy of a room. I'm talking about the power of restraint, the disarming strength of saying nothing. See, we live in a world where the loudest voice often gets mistaken for the strongest, where arguments spiral into performance, where the fastest reaction is confused with control. But real strength, real influence, it comes from silence, and not the passive, weak kind of silence, not silence born from fear, but silence chosen with intention, with awareness, with unshakable composure. Your silence disarms more than your words. We've all been there, in those moments when someone challenges you, insults you, pokes at your insecurities, and your ego surges forward screaming, defend yourself, prove them wrong, win the argument. And most of the time, that's exactly what they want. They want to pull you in, to get under your skin, to drag you down into their emotional chaos. Because if they can control your reaction, they control you. But when you refuse to play, when you meet their provocation with calm stillness, when you withhold your energy, your words, your presence, you disarm them, you unnerve them, you reveal their weakness. Without ever raising your voice, it's the quietest, most effective counterattack there is. Not every battle deserves your energy. We've been conditioned to believe that silence equals surrender, that if you don't defend yourself, you've lost. But that's a shallow understanding of power. Sometimes silence is the ultimate move of control. It's saying, this battle not worth my energy, not worth my peace, not worth stepping down to their level. Barack Obama understood this better than most. Throughout his presidency, he was often labeled as passive or aloof. Critics accused him of being too reserved, too unwilling to engage, but it wasn't weakness, it was strategy. Obama practiced what Politico once called a soft media strategy. He avoided the constant confrontations with the press. He limited his participation in the noisy, combative political debates. And instead, he chose where, when, and how to speak, not out of fear, but out of discipline, out of restraint, out of power. And here's the thing, it frustrated his critics deeply, because when they shouted into the void and he gave them nothing back, they lost their grip, their tactics lost momentum, their chaos fell flat. The Stoics taught this long before politics perfected it. The Stoics, Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, Seneca, they all understood that most conflicts don't begin with facts, they begin with egos, the need to be right, the need to be seen, the need to be superior. And they knew that if you're ruled by your ego, you're predictable. You are easily controlled, easily provoked, easily defeated. But the person who chooses silence, who observes first, who lets others reveal their emotions, their insecurities, their tactics, while remaining unmoved, that person becomes unreadable, unshakable, and deeply, deeply magnetic. Your silence isn't weakness, it's mastery. Most people don't practice silence because, frankly, it's hard. It's uncomfortable. It feels like clenching your fist in a room full of people begging you to throw the first punch. But when you master that discomfort, when you stay grounded, when you say, I'm silent because I'm in control, not because I'm afraid, people feel it. Even if they don't consciously understand it, they sense it. And in that silence, you claim your power. The power of deliberate pauses. Here's a simple practice. The next time someone provokes you online or in person, pause, breathe, step back mentally, and ask yourself, is what I'm about to say coming from truth or from my discomfort with feeling powerless? If you're not sure, don't say it, because one careless, emotionally driven sentence can do more damage than 100 apologies can undo. Instead, let your silence speak for you in meetings, in disagreements, in everyday interactions. Don't rush to fill the space. Observe. Let others reveal themselves, their neediness, their insecurity, their desperation for control. And when you finally choose to speak, your words land like stones in still water. They carry weight. They shift the entire dynamic. They remind everyone that you are present, you are aware, and you are not easily provoked. Mystery is more powerful than noise. There's a reason people are drawn to mystery. We're wired for curiosity. We're intrigued by what we can't fully grasp. We chase what holds back. We lean in when someone doesn't scramble to be understood. The person who overshares, who reacts immediately, who wears every emotion on their sleeve, they reveal themselves entirely, and they lose their magnetism. But the person who chooses what to reveal, when to speak, when to remain silent, they become a mystery, a puzzle, a presence that pulls others in without trying. Stoic stillness is the ultimate strength, Marcus Aurelius wrote. Be like the cliff against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. That is stoic presence. That is silent strength. That is what makes you unshakable and undeniably attractive. Most people lose control. You hold it. Here's the truth. The more you react, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier you are to control. But when you hold your silence, when you choose your words, when you let others waste their energy while you conserve yours, you hold control, you hold power. You become the person others can't quite figure out, but can't stop thinking about. Small steps to build quiet magnetism. Start small. When someone insults you, pause. When you're tempted to fire off a defensive message, stop. When asked a question, breathe before answering. When the room grows tense, stay grounded. When your ego screams to defend itself, smile and say nothing. These small silences, these quiet moments of restraint, they build a presence around you, a calm, a mystery, an energy that doesn't need performance to be noticed. Magnetism isn't created through noise. It's cultivated through self-mastery, through silence, through being unshakably yourself, even when the world tries to provoke you. And here's the paradox. The more you hold back, the more people lean in, the less you react, and the more they crave your attention. The quieter your presence, the louder your energy. In the next part, we'll take this even deeper, because once you master silence, the next frontier is boundaries. And boundaries aren't walls to keep people out. They're standards that teach the world how to treat you. Let me ask you something that most people avoid reflecting on. How often do you betray yourself just to be liked? How many times have you smiled through discomfort, agreed when you didn't mean it, said yes when your soul was screaming no, all because you were afraid of disappointing someone? Afraid of appearing difficult, afraid of being seen as selfish, afraid of being rejected. It's so subtle and so dangerous, because every time you abandon your boundaries to keep the peace, you trade your self-respect for temporary comfort. And here's the truth no one wants to say out loud. The more agreeable you become, the less attractive you appear. Boundaries aren't walls. They're standards. People often misunderstand boundaries. They imagine rigid walls, barriers that keep others out, coldness disguised as confidence. But real boundaries, they aren't designed to push people away. They're designed to teach people how to treat you. They're not about rejection. They're about self-respect. Boundaries aren't aggression, they're quiet dignity. They're the unspoken declaration that says, I know who I am, I know what I stand for, and I will not sacrifice my peace to make you comfortable. And that is rare, and rare is magnetic. The power of calm unapologetic. No, think about the last time someone told you no, not with anger, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. No long explanation, no nervous apology, just no. How did you feel? Annoyed, maybe at first, but deeper than that, there is respect, maybe even curiosity, because someone who can say no without crumbling, without defending themselves, signals something powerful. I don't fear your disapproval. I value my peace more than your validation. And in a world addicted to people-pleasing, that's rare, that's attractive, that's magnetic. Boundaries show self-knowledge. The person with strong boundaries knows themselves. They don't need to perform. They don't over-explain. They don't scramble to win approval. They simply decide what they will and won't tolerate. Decide who they allow into their life. Decide how they spend their energy. And when you witness that, you feel it. A quiet edge, a subtle strength, an unspoken confidence that commands respect. Look at Serena Williams, a fierce athlete, a global icon. But beyond her physical strength, what makes her presence so compelling is her boundaries. Under the blinding lights of fame, under relentless media scrutiny, she draws lines. She protects her privacy. She defends her peace. And because she refuses to trade her dignity for approval, she's not just respected as a champion, she's admired as a grounded, whole human being. Stoic boundaries are ancient and essential. The Stoics taught this long before Instagram influencers tried to repackage it. They understood the boundaries aren't just social skill, they're proof of a trained mind. A mind that doesn't waver under pressure, a mind that refuses to be swept away by emotion or manipulation. Epictetus said, "No person is free who is not master of themselves," and boundaries are self-mastery in action. When you're clear on what you will and won't accept, you don't need to react. You don't need to defend yourself. You simply stand, and people learn how to approach you, how to respect you, how to engage with you, or not. Boundaries quietly reshape relationships. When you set boundaries, people push back. At first, they test you, they resist, because they're used to the version of you who bent over backwards, who said yes, who never disappointed. But when you stand firm, when you hold the line, something incredible happens. They adjust. They respect you more. They lean in, not because you begged for their attention, but because you showed you don't need it. And those who can't respect your boundaries, they leave. Good, let them. Because anyone threatened by your self-respect was never truly for you to begin with. Practical boundaries you can set today. 1. Decide your non-negotiables. What behaviors, demands, or dynamics steal your peace? Write them down. Make them clear to yourself first. 2. Create quiet distance. You don't need to announce your boundaries loudly. You simply withdraw energy. Stop over-explaining. Stop responding instantly. Stop chasing clarity where it isn't offered. 3. Say no without apology. You don't owe anyone a detailed justification. A simple, "that doesn't work for me," is enough. 4. Hold your time sacred. Protect your evenings. Guard your mornings. Decide when you're available and when you're not, and stick to it. 5. Trust the discomfort. Boundaries feel awkward at first. You'll feel guilt. You'll feel resistance. Stay with it. Growth always comes dressed as discomfort. Boundaries make you mysterious and irresistible. There's a quiet edge to the person who can say no, who doesn't scramble to be available, who doesn't offer endless access to their energy. And that edge creates mystery, and mystery is magnetic. We're wired to be curious about what isn't fully accessible. We lean in to what holds back. We value what isn't easily earned, and boundaries cultivate exactly that. People chase what doesn't chase them. The paradox is simple. The more you chase approval, the less attractive you appear. The more you stand still, confident, clear, unbothered, the more people are drawn toward you. It's not a game. It's human psychology. We're designed to pursue what feels grounded, whole, complete. The person without boundaries, they reek of neediness. The person with boundaries, they radiate self-sufficiency. And that is compelling when you hold the right distance. People lean in. Have you ever noticed this dynamic when you set a boundary? When you stop over-responding, when you create quiet space, people often lean in. Not because you beg for attention, but because you remove the performance, and suddenly they're curious, intrigued, drawn to your restraint. The subtle art of becoming hard to reach in a world obsessed with availability. Becoming hard to reach is a quiet power move, not out of arrogance, not out of avoidance, but out of deep self-respect. You don't answer every message instantly. You don't attend every event. You don't offer access to your time, your energy, your emotions to anyone at any time. And in doing so, you create space, mystery, magnetism. Boundaries aren't about control. They're about choice. Boundaries don't control others. They guide you. They help you choose where your energy goes, who has access to your time, what behaviors you engage with, what dynamics you simply refuse to participate in. And in that quiet discipline, you become unshakable, unpredictable, and undeniably attractive. In the next part, we'll dive even deeper into unpredictability. Why mystery isn't a performance, but a natural byproduct of restraint, self-awareness, and not needing to be seen. If there's one thing humans are irresistibly drawn to, it's mystery. Not confusion, not chaos, but true, grounded mystery. We chase what we can't fully grasp. We lean in to what holds something back. We stay curious when we sense there's more beneath the surface, and that's exactly why unpredictability is irresistible. See, most people live on the surface. They're emotionally transparent. They react instantly. They overshare. They try so hard to be seen, to be understood, to be accepted. And in doing so, they lose their mystery. They become predictable, and predictability, it kills attraction. The power of holding something back. Real magnetism doesn't come from being loud or always available or emotionally exposed. It comes from restraint, from deliberate silence, from holding back, not out of fear, but from deep self-awareness. The Stoics understood this long before modern psychology gave it a name. They knew that when you can resist the urge to explain, to justify, to react, you create space for curiosity, space for intrigue, space for attraction to grow naturally. Mystery isn't an act, it's self-mastery. This isn't about playing games. It's not about faking aloofness. It's not about manipulating others. It's about becoming so steady in yourself, so anchored, so whole, that you no longer feel the compulsive need to be constantly seen. When you live that way, you naturally hold something back, and people lean in. Predictability is the enemy of attraction. Think about the most magnetic people you've ever encountered. Were they always the most talkative, the most available, the most emotionally exposed? No. They were the ones you couldn't quite figure out. The ones who spoke with intention, who revealed themselves slowly, who weren't easily rattled and never easily read. It wasn't because they were hiding. It was because they didn't need to be fully understood to feel secure, and that is rare, and rare is magnetic. Stillness creates depth, and depth creates desire. In a world obsessed with surface-level connections, the person with depth becomes an outlier, a curiosity, an attraction point. When you don't rush to fill every silence, when you observe more than you speak, when you let others reveal themselves first, you create mystery, depth, a quiet pull that words can't manufacture. Unpredictability isn't immaturity, it's discipline. Let's be clear. There's a difference between unpredictable and unstable. Unpredictability is deliberate. It's the ability to choose what to reveal, when to speak, when to hold back. It's rooted in control, in clarity, in choice. Instability is chaos. It's emotional reactivity disguised as edge. It's inconsistency born from insecurity. But true unpredictability, it's not random. It's refined. It's the product of someone who knows themselves, trusts themselves, doesn't perform for others. And from that grounded presence, they naturally become hard to read and hard to forget. The subtle art of emotional restraint. Most people reveal too much, too soon, their fears, their wounds, their need for approval. And in doing so, they erode their presence. But the person who holds something back, who doesn't explain every emotion, who doesn't over-justify their boundaries, who lets their stillness do the talking, they become magnetic. Because humans are wired to chase mystery. We lean in when we can't predict. We value what we can't fully understand. We stay curious when we sense there's more. The quiet confidence of stillness. Look at the person in the room who doesn't scramble to be noticed, who doesn't rush to fill every silence, who isn't easily provoked. They hold their pace, their energy, their boundaries, and slowly the room leans in. Not because they performed, but because their restraint created curiosity, and curiosity fuels attraction. Restraint isn't repression, it's power. Stoicism doesn't teach silence to suppress. It teaches silence to preserve freedom, to guard energy, to stay in control. When you react too quickly, you hand control to others. When you hold your silence, you create space that no one else can touch. And in that space, you reclaim your power. The simple daily practice of mystery. Start small. In conversations, resist the urge to overshare. When praised, smile, but don't over-explain. When provoked, pause, breathe, stay still. When asked personal questions, answer only what feels aligned. When you feel the urge to prove yourself, hold back, breathe, trust. Your quiet presence is enough. Over time, these small moments of restraint build mystery, and mystery builds attraction. The world doesn't need to know everything. In a culture obsessed with exposure, with instant access, with oversharing, the person who guards their energy, their story, their emotions, becomes rare, and rare is irresistible. Unpredictability makes you memorable. Predictable people fade into the background. They're seen, they're understood, they're quickly forgotten. But the person who doesn't reveal everything, who keeps part of their world private, who holds a quiet edge, they linger, In the mind, they occupy. Curiosity, they stay. In the heart, not because they begged for attention, but because they didn't. The final paradox of mystery. When you stop scrambling to be noticed, you're noticed more. When you stop over-explaining, you're understood differently. When you stop trying to prove yourself, you become undeniable. It's not a game, it's human psychology, it's ancient wisdom. It's what the Stoics lived, and what modern leaders subconsciously embody. In the next part, we'll explore the final unshakable piece of this puzzle, the deepest source of confidence, the quiet, self-contained wholeness that makes you magnetic, even when no one's looking. There's a kind of confidence that can't be faked. It's not loud, it's not boastful, it's not rooted in external validation. It's quiet, steady, deep. And when you feel it in someone, it's unforgettable. It's the confidence that comes from wholeness, not neediness. Confidence comes from wholeness, not neediness. Most people misunderstand confidence. They think it's volume, swagger, perfect posture, flawless words. But real confidence doesn't require an audience. It doesn't need applause. It isn't built on compliments. Real confidence is what remains when all of that falls away, when the room is quiet, when the spotlight is off, when the crowd isn't clapping, and you still know who you are. That is magnetic. That is rare. The lion doesn't roar to prove it's king. Picture a lion in the wild. It doesn't pace the savannah, roaring constantly, desperately proving its dominance. It moves quietly, purposefully, and yet every creature feels its presence before it even appears. The lion isn't performing, it simply is. Whole, grounded, unapologetically itself. And humans, we're no different. True magnetism isn't how many heads you turn. It's the quiet energy that follows you into every room because your confidence isn't for sale. A soul that isn't hungry is irresistible. We've all been around people desperately seeking validation. It's obvious. It's exhausting. They overshare. They overcompensate. They overreact. And over time, their presence drains you. But the person who doesn't crave constant validation, who isn't performing, who isn't trying to impress, they become a curiosity, a steady, grounded presence, and the human mind is wired to lean in when something doesn't need us to survive. Wholeness isn't a performance, it's daily discipline. Wholeness doesn't happen by accident. It isn't built overnight. It's a quiet daily practice. It's saying no to what fragments you. It's choosing solitude over shallow approval. It's doing the hard inner work when no one's watching. David Goggins didn't become who he is, but for the followers, for the clout, for the applause. He became that man in the dark, alone, in silence, when no one was watching. And he chose to master himself anyway. And now the world can't look away, not because he chased their attention, but because his quiet discipline created unshakable presence. Stop chasing attention. Start building presence. Attention is cheap, it's fleeting, it's addictive, but presence, it lasts, it lingers. It speaks without words. When you stop reacting out of insecurity, when you stop chasing empty praise, when you stop explaining yourself constantly, you begin to build presence, the kind of presence that doesn't need to be loud to be noticed, the kind that doesn't need to be seen to be felt. Most people are exhausted trying to be attractive. Here's the brutal irony. The more you try to be attractive, the less attractive you become. Neediness, it repels. Performance repels. Over-explaining repels. But grounded wholeness, presence, restraint, they pull people in. You don't chase, you don't prove, you don't scramble, you stand steady, complete. And the world notices. The wholeness test. Ask yourself, would you still feel worthy? If the compliments stopped, would you still stand tall? If the validation dried up, would you still trust your path? If no one noticed your progress, if the answer's no, it's not weakness, it's an invitation to stop outsourcing your worth, to start building from within. Inner wholeness is built in solitude. Most people fear being alone. They crave constant connection, constant feedback. But solitude isn't loneliness. It's a sacred space where your real confidence is forged. 10 quiet minutes a day. No phone, no performance, no expectations, just you and your thoughts. Over time, you realize some insecurities don't need fixing. They just need to stop being fed. Some fears don't need conquering. They need space to dissolve. The quiet power of saying no. Want to test your wholeness? Say no. No to empty conversations. No to hollow praise. No to behaviors that tether you to others' approval. Every time you say no to what's shallow, you say yes to what's real, to what's grounded, to the part of you that knows peace doesn't need proof. Stop explaining your integrity. Even the greatest teachers were misunderstood. Even Jesus was doubted. So what makes you think you owe the world an explanation? For your peace, for your stillness, for your restraint, you don't. Live your integrity and let your energy speak for itself. The most magnetic people have stopped chasing. They aren't the loudest. They aren't the flashiest. They're the ones who've stopped chasing altogether. They've stopped chasing attention, approval, validation, performance, and in doing so, their presence becomes undeniable. Not because they begged for attention, but because their quiet, disciplined energy demands it. You don't need to be chosen. You need to be whole. Here's the final liberating truth. You don't need to be chosen to be worthy. You don't need to be seen to be magnetic. You don't need to be loud to be respected. You need to be whole, quietly, deeply, unapologetically. Whole. And from that wholeness, everything else follows. The complete puzzle. Why detachment and non-reactivity make you attractive. Let's piece it all together. When you detach, you stop reacting and start observing. When you master silence, you disarm chaos and create mystery. When you set boundaries, you teach the world how to treat you. When you become unpredictable, you create intrigue. When you cultivate wholeness, you radiate quiet, unshakable presence. No performance, no scrambling, no begging for approval. Just steady, grounded, magnetic energy. The final paradox of attraction. The less you chase, the more you're chased. The less you explain, the more you're understood. The less you react, the more you control the room. The less you need, the more you're desired. Your presence speaks before you do. The Stoics knew this. Marcus Aurelius lived it. Keanu Reeves embodies it. David Goggins forged it. Barack Obama practiced it. Serena Williams protects it. Quiet, confident, detached, magnetic. You can live it. 2, it starts the moment you stop. Stop reacting. Stop over-explaining. Stop chasing attention. Stop performing. And instead, start building presence. Start mastering silence. Start protecting your peace. Start standing still, complete, unbothered. And when you do, you won't need to convince anyone that you're attractive. your energy will speak for itself. So let yourself rest now. Let your body unwind. Let your mind settle. You've spent enough energy trying to be seen. Now it's time to simply be. You are already enough. You are already magnetic without doing the thing. Good night and sweet dreams.